Hi. Um, there are three elements of passing that I want to address with my presentation. They are homosexual undertones, aspects of Nella Larson's life, sort of biographical stuff, and some thoughts on the scope of the project. So first of all, one piece of critical writing that I came across during my research was That Unreasonable Restless Feeling, the homosexual subtexts of Nella Larson's passing by David L. Blackmore. While the paper is really only available by subscription, I was able to use some of the research skills that I learned this semester to kind of dredge up enough of the important bits to kind of make a point out of it. When I was reading the novel, it was clear to me that Irene had an attraction to Claire on some level that transcended platonic friendship. And I think that Larson kind of like artfully straddles a line between explication and implication in her presentation of this idea. The paper also raises the possibility that Brian, her husband, is homosexual. Um, and I quote, "The Redfields' very reputable marriage is sexless. They have separate bedrooms, and while Irene and Brian have produced children, they identify each other as co-parents, not as active sexual partners." McDowell's introduction to the 1986 edition of Passing explicitly identifies the presence of homosexual tension between Claire and Irene. Having established the absence of sex from the marriages of these two women, Larson can flirt, if only by suggestion, with the idea of a lesbian relationship between them. Blackmore ultimately asserts that both Irene and Brian long for a less hierarchical socio-sexual system which will allow them to express their same-sex desire. I would raise the point that if this is true, their marriage is a parallel to the practice of racial passing. They've adopted personas that are not full expressions of themselves, but allow them to get along better in a hierarchical and repressive social system that's rife not only with racial prejudice but also homophobia. And the second point about Nella Larson's life is that despite passing success, Larson retreated from the public sphere after its publication. According to Wikipedia, she was accused of plagiarism for her short story Sanctuary, which bore similarities to Mrs. Addis by Sheila K. Smith. She suffered from depression, scrapped work on a follow-up to Passing, and would never write again. She worked as a nurse, disappeared from literary circles, and moved to the Lower East Side. She did not venture into Harlem any longer. And some of her old acquaintances speculated that she had passed into the white world, and she broke contact with many longtime friends. She died in her Brooklyn apartment in 1964 at the age of 72. So that was something that I thought was interesting. There's certainly aspects of Passing that are autobiographical, but it's not completely autobiographical. Um, and then the third thing I wanted to address was just the scope of the project and what I liked about it. One thing that I thought was interesting about this project was its potential scope and the sort of like open-endedness of it. I appreciated and tried to take advantage of the opportunity to connect literature to other fields. For me, it was sociology and politics, and there were a wealth of articles in those fields that I was able to draw from, thankfully. I felt that the sociological readings I used for my paper helped me to draw all sorts of meaning out of Passing, stuff that initially went over my head. And I think Passing is successful because it's such a realistic representation of personal experience, complete with an unreliable narrator, which is an important part of that. And to understand historically the nature of Nella Larson's world is to understand Irene's world. I think art is a powerful tool for the communication of ideas. Once used largely to relay religious concepts, it now has the capacity to intricately link fields of study and imbue them with new meaning. And I think that's really cool. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much. Take care.